Hello and welcome to a brand new Let's Play OTTD. I'm Jimster Gaming, your host to this series. In this first episode, I will bring up my ideas and plans, give some background, and talk about the game itself. And we are going to see a huge Europe map that we are going to cover in rails, roads, fill the skies with airplanes, fill the seas with ships, and transport a huge amount of goods around and make some billions. So let's start out with a few clips from a playthrough of this game that I made a few years ago. And it just shows a little bit what can happen on this map. I think we are starting off in Gothenburg as we listen to the story behind the series and the narrative. The narrative of this series is an alternative history lesson. So, in 1945, when the Second World War finished, the Americans were simply fed up with being meddled into European wars and came up with a radical solution that they enforced on every country in Europe. All vehicles were confiscated, all moving machinery was banned, all scientists in those areas were moved over the Atlantic, all railroads were dismantled, all roads outside cities were dug up, all sea vessels were scrapped. Europe was again left with horse and cart, stationary engines in the best case, horse and cart on narrow paths, rowing boats, tiny sailing ships, and it's only as its only mode of transportation. The idea behind the scheme was to ensure that there will never be another world war starting in Europe. This caused cities to be largely abandoned, of course, people moving out to the countryside, trying to live in the countryside, all kinds of supply chain was completely disrupted, and that was the idea behind it. So mines, factories, and similar things were left as they were. Many of them stayed in business, very small business that was, because there was always someone that could need a horse and cart, or a new cart at least. And this all changed in the late 1980s. The Americans elected themselves a new president that promised civilizations and cigars to the world. And this happened to coincide with the richest man in England visiting Newcastle, where he was shown the remains of George Stephenson's workshop. And if that wasn't enough, two old men, a Swiss and a Swede, met by accident in a small bar in Amsterdam and realized that both of them in their young days had worked on train designs. The Americans had ignored moving the neutral Swedish and Swiss engineers over the pond, and the same with Turkish, Irish and Portuguese ones, since they were not involved in the war either. So after some drinks, it turned out that both the Swedes and the Swiss had secretly kept up to date on train designs and train development. And gossip travels fast. So within weeks, an English industrialist had heard about the two old men in the bar in Amsterdam and decided to track them down. He had also heard a story about the richest man in England visiting Newcastle. So together they set up a plan. And eventually an international agreement between the US and the countries of Europe were struck and reopened the possibility to again construct infrastructure. However, no one had any money or the know-how to do it. Or, well, that was what people thought anyway. But was that actually true? Or could things move in a different direction? So this is what the game looks like and what the map looks like. So we have basically a standard European map with height. It's based on a height map and then adjusted. Rivers added, a lot of cities added, industry added where it's correct to have it, basically, where the industry exists or existed at the start of this century. So you can see in North Africa there is mainly light industry and raw materials, while when we go over to Germany we have a lot of coal and iron, but also a lot of industry, and the same in the UK. Just to make it look as realistic as possible. So if we look at the northeast, we will see there's a lot of forests here. And if you look at the southeast, you can see that there's a lot of farming and raw materials, because that's a much bigger part of the economy. I have put some oil fields in. We have the ones in Damascus, which is pretending to be Indonesia. We have someone in eastern Turkey, which is pretending to be Persia. And we have one down at the bottom of the map in Morocco, which is pretending to be Venezuela. The city names are usually in local language. I might have missed someone. But in general, that was the plan. As you can see, there's just a huge amount of towns and industries that needs to be connected to make something out of it. So to jump down to a lower level, we can see, for example, in Ireland, here we have Waterford, a huge town with 44 or 44,000 maybe inhabitants. Close by there is a glassworks and an arable farm. So that means we can see already now that there's a lot of things that needs to be moved here. Sugar refinery. We have the Isle of Man. We have Belfast. And we have, let me see, we have the Thames running through London, Oxford, and up through the countryside all the way here, close to Bristol. So all the rivers have been put in. Let's remove some trees, like that. So the height maps is rather realistic, or it's based on a real height map. I decided not to make things too steep, so the Alps are not that high, but you can still see them clearly. Looks like a strange brain. So we have to cross the Alps, and there are a bunch of rules, but I will go through those later on. So, as a part of the narrative, we just assume that the industries of Europe stayed dormant for 45 years, during the second round of a medieval period, so to say, and that by 1990 they came to life again, or well, they had probably existed in a very small scale, but in 1990 suddenly it was again possible to start moving things around in Europe, and therefore there are huge opportunities, but also huge challenges for anyone that could find some money enough to start some form of transport system or transport network. And that is what we are going to do in this playthrough. The mission, our mission, should we decide to accept it, is to reconnect Europe in a financially viable way. So we have to make some money to expand the business. And by expanding the business, we will simply make more money. And the first railway, the first real railway in the world, was built between Stockton and Darlington. And that is actually where we are going to start again. So the first routes will be in this area, close to Newcastle and Middlesbrough, because that's where Stockton and Darlington is. And that will be in the next episode, by the way. So there isn't really a goal. The goal is to play and have fun, and when it's no longer fun, the series will just end. And that's simple as that. But I'm sure it's possible to get something out of it anyway. There are a bunch of rules, and I'm going to go through those in a second. To my help to sort out this map, because the plan is to try to evenly distribute goods, which is kind of difficult in this case because the map has 703 cities, 1771 industries. So it's going to be a lot of things moving around, and since some products are not produced everywhere, it's going to require quite a lot of shuffling with trains, trucks, ships and airplanes. And to my help, I have created a file. So the file contains every single city. It contains every single industry, and I have bunched them together and decided exactly where to move every single thing. But that is just in the industry part. So in every city there is also something consuming, and that could be either a gas station or a convenience store or something else, or hotel. Those are not yet done. We'll see what we do with them, if we even bother to do that. Passengers, same there. We'll see if we do something with that or not. At least not in the early game. The early game it's just about moving goods around, because that's where the money is. But we will see where we end up with that. And the same with the farms. All farms are also listed. All forests are listed, and they are matched so that we get an even distribution of wood to the different wood needing industries. So that's going to be a challenge, but we're up for it. And over to the house rules. So number 1, an integrated network. Keep it realistic. Number 2, no extensive bridge building or tunneling. Keep it realistic. 3, only small terrain adjustments except where stations are, because they need flat land. 4, follow the lay of the land. 5, minimize the use of complex junctions. 6. Standard length tile 8 of trains. 7. No vessels can travel a one tile river. 8. Help the towns to grow. 9. Bridge over sea tiles that weren't started in 1945 should not be built. 10. No ro-ro stations. 11. Double height bridges for large ships. As we slowly move down the Vistula River in Poland, in Krakow, look at all the nice trees, and I have it open actually, so let's just remove them completely. So slowly going down the Vistula and telling the story. So 25 years ago I had just moved from home and by accident fell over Transport Tycoon on a sale in a video store. It looked appealing, but not anything I've ever tried at that time. I decided to spend on a game and save on food to get my meager student's allowance to last the rest of the month. So the original game was good, not great, but Transport Tycoon was a nice and good game. Then I found Transport Tycoon Deluxe, or TTD, on some download place at the time when it was, I think it was rather new. I later bought it actually, so I do actually have it in the basement somewhere, a real copy on a CD. And that one was addictive though, because it had so much extra features, or well, some extra features that made the game much more playable, especially the signaling part of it, so you could build networks, which was impossible in the original game. And I remember an evening when suddenly the newspaper arrived, meaning it was actually not evening anymore, it was 4:30 in the morning, so 2.5 hours of sleep to get to the 9 a.m. lecture. The sequel was Locomotion, which was not addictive in the same way. I did have the game, I probably still have it in the basement as well somewhere, but it's not something I've played much because, well, it was a little bit fun, but I went back to Transport Tycoon Deluxe quickly afterwards. Same with Railroad Tycoon 2 and 3. I did play them, but I kept coming back to TTD. Then 5-6 years ago, I stumbled over OpenTTD. And that one was even, or this one actually, is even more addictive. With all the added features, with the patch packs, the new graphics, everything that makes the game much more playable, much more enjoyable. At least for me, it is. And I have played this really much back and forth from time to time in the last 5 to 6 years. Had a little bit of a break lately because I've been playing Transport Fever 2, and well, there are always other games as well that needs playing sometimes. So that is the OpenTTD story. And as we watch Warsaw, we notice that all of them actually have Swedish flags, and that comes from new graphics actually. So I'm using the JG, well, yeah, the patch pack anyway. And I've added some, let me see, there are some new graphics, so the list is here, continues there, and the last two down there. And this is basically just to add some features. that I like. I like to have the different station types, and I have the Swiss and the Swedish trains as part of the narrative, because, well, as we all know now, it was the Sweden, the Swiss guy that met in a bar in Amsterdam and made it all possible again. I've also added the base cost mods, so I've put bridge building and tunnel building 4 times more expensive. I put raise and lower land 8 times more expensive, and clear water 16 times more expensive. It doesn't really make any difference because I didn't plan to do anything with them anyway. Or, well, abuse the features anyway. So, yeah, that should be all good. So that is where we are. So thank you so much for watching this first teaser, so to say. And we are looking forward to the first real episode.